Tabletop will start after the following messages. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tabletop. Today, we are talking about conflict at the table. Whether you have a small or big group, you're probably going to have times where players are disagreeing and things might start getting heated. The big question is, as a GM, how do you handle this conflict? And then, as a player, how do you handle this conflict? To discuss this today, we have all the Tabletop favorites. Why don't we introduce ourselves? I'm Nick, your host, and to my left is...
Franco. Sorry, you were to my right? That makes sense. Never mind.
Yep.
Skip me. And to my right...
You put your left hand out like this, and then your right hand out like this, and you form two L's. I'm Shade.
I'm Daniel, also here. I have no conflict to add to this disagreement of left and right.
All right, everyone. So we've all been at tables as both players and GM. So I guess the first thing to talk about is have any of you experienced conflict at your tables? And if so, what was the situation? Like, what was the general vibe? We don't have to go into specifics in case it was me. But what
This
was
is a therapy session.
Exactly.
This is an intervention.
I think like one of the biggest grounds of conflict that I've had in running a games is when people don't like what ruling you've made as a GM.
Yeah.
And they argue about how the rule should be or what techniques or what rules you should be allowing for a situation to where DMing from the player side to try to get out of a bad situation always causes some gruff.
Rules lawyering is always a really tough one because there's a room full of rules lawyers here.
Also true.
Me included. But yeah, I think it's very, I don't know, it's tough. And I think we've talked about this before, but I always feel like the best strategy, and I've used this before too. I've actually gotten to use this before once, which was great. But you basically just like, okay, I just made the ruling, and we can check that later, and let's move on.
Yeah,
basically is like the way I've handled it in the past.
Delay tactics are always great.
Yeah, and I mean, like, really,
let's have this discussion after the game.
yeah, and it's like what you often talk about, Nick, like tempo. Is like, let's just keep it going. It's a game. We're wheeling and dealing.
Yeah. What about you, Shade?
Yeah, I've certainly been that rules lawyer guy, and I apologize, Daniel. But I've seen conflict at the table. I've seen relationships break up.
Yeah.
Outside of the table. I've seen issues of just very conflicting play styles. Players who just aren't paying attention, and the other players who are meticulous note takers and really don't like that player that's not paying attention. Seen a bit of it all.
So I've also seen a bit of a lot of different things. I haven't actually seen someone in a relationship break up because of the table. Or
it wasn't because of the table.
Just it's like one of those things like, oh, we can track where this relationship is. But I've also had some conflict at the table, and it's weird. It's like, it's hard to deal with, especially as when you're on the GM side and you're seeing stuff start like getting heated. You're like, uh-oh, how does this how it happen? So like, what do you guys think? What are the best ways to just sort of like either set rules or steer the ship in a way that you can minimize your experience of having these conflict arise at the table? Yeah,
I think minimize is a good word there, because you're not going to avoid conflict. It's going to happen. It's just part of life. There are going to be moments where, the person, because you've gathered around this table, you're friends, you care about each other. There are going to be moments where your friends are going to do something you're like, what the hell are they thinking?
Yeah.
As a GM, as another player, and they're going to think the same about you. It's going to happen. But I think, one of the best bits of advice I can ever offer is just be patient with the other player, with the GM, and, don't be so precious about your own internal narrative about this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think thinking about the game as a conversation will, I don't know, like think about
Conversations don't have people yelling at each other.
well, they do,
like good
I guess.
Conversations.
Well, yeah, like a good conversation. Well, you know, like you have like an ebb and flow of like where, you know, where the narrative is going of the story at the time. Like the ebbing and the flow type of thing is I think important, because then like each player is getting a chance, you know, to be like, oh, I want to do it this way, and then you're like, okay, that's a conflict. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's like it's important to try to think about the whole game as a conversation rather than thinking about it as like, I'm going to win and I'm going to play better than this person. This person doesn't play right. Or you know, like, why is this person doing this thing? Or why aren't they paying attention? And like, and it's, I don't know.
One thing sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
Oh,
we both got it right away.
Well, that's like one of the things I think causes a lot of conflict and confrontation at a game is a person gets lost in their own thoughts, like this is how it should be, and start projecting what they think other people should be doing.
That's a really
like
tough one.
Disagreeing with like you're playing wrong. And one of the things like you always talk about, if you are in therapy, go to therapy. It's great. One of the conflict like things is like you have to give up the right to be right.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and the only person you can control is you. So if you think you're doing something right, you know, give that up. Like, just realize that other people aren't playing by your standards, and just sort of like try to see what they're doing and get out of your own head a little bit.
just be happy being right and smug to yourself.
One thing that all of you kind of have gestured at during your answers was the difference between player conflict and character conflict. I think that both of those things tend to happen and can lead to some kind of disastrous results.
Yeah.
Where like characters can be diametrically opposed, and I mean, like Daniel, in a game that we recently played, I was the GM. You literally were like, oh, my character pushes you all out of a van and runs away because you're going to try to kill him, kind of thing.
Yeah. There was a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
That was in no part Giles' fault at all.
But yeah, so like that can happen. And I feel like that's almost easier to solve sometimes if everyone is sort of like in the same headspace of like we're trying to like make a good narrative.
Yeah,
kind
character
of thing.
Conflict is in the game and part of storytelling. When that gets out of hand and becomes player conflict is when there's a problem.
Yeah, and I think that it's like a kind of a slippery slope between it jumping from character to
shift
player.
over real quick.
So what do you guys think about that sort of dynamic and how to encourage good conflict for good narratives, but while also keeping it so that people aren't, you know, actually getting upset?
So I think that we all as players, we shift a little bit in our play style between first and third person narrative. You know, you might say, oh, that was no fault of Giles, but in the moment you might equally say, oh, that was not my fault. That's a moment when things are starting to kind of get heated between characters, and you can kind of feel that tension rising possibly between the players as well as a result, because it is a slippery slope.
I think that that's such a smart thing to say of like you saying this was no fault of Giles and this is not my fault could be used interchangeably
Correct.
in that moment.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah,
like things,
and-
like this could get like spooky real quick.
And I do think that you know, moving to a third person in those moments can be helpful.
That's a smart idea.
But
thought about
but there's also the problem of, well, that's how my character would act. Yeah. And that is never a good response.
Yeah.
If
No,
you've
it's really
if you have moved to that means that this character is no longer a team player.
Let me come at you from
go for
an
it.
opposite side, because
Yeah.
sometimes your character would do that.
You're right.
Yeah,
As, like,
it's true.
And it's such like a, because, you know, no absolutes in life.
You're right.
My character would do that, but also don't just use that as an excuse. You really got to think about this if you're going to say that. Is that what your character would do? Or is it something that you wanted your character to do and you're using that as an excuse to do it?
It's sort of like
I'm sorry.
No, it's sort of like a almost a veto system kind of saying like, if you're going to say that's what my character would actually do, you only get like 2 of those in like a full campaign.
Yeah.
Where you're like in a place and you're like, no, my character would do that because I know that or he thinks that person like killed his mom or whatever. So of course he's going to try to like do everything in his power to like confront that person,
like that's,
even though it's not optimal.
That seems like one where you wouldn't have to use that card though.
Yeah,
like that
but like,
example.
let me give you an example where, let's say you're in towards the end of a campaign maybe, and your characters are in like a deep stealth kind of moment, and one character is like, that's the person that, you know, my backstory is centered around. My entire character has been driving towards confronting this person. I'm going to confront this person. And then the whole group is like, no, but then everything's screwed up if you do that. And you're like, that's what my character would do. Like,
and I have a great idea, a thought. If that's what your character would do, you need to role play that in such a way that other players have a chance to intercept that or fix it.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a moment where this is something that my character would do, then you as a player need to express to the other players, hey, this is about to happen.
Yeah.
Prep. Don't surprise players at the table with your character making a weird out-of-the-box thing. I think just talking about it is like go above board and then dive back into the game.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And this is also such a slippery slope, because I totally agree. And I actually I have played moments where I expect people in the party to like jump on top of me and be like, don't do that. And be like, okay, but like my character still expressed or was true to the character that I made, where they try to do something or express they're going to do something. And then the party, for the greater good, stops them from doing that. And then maybe we have to role play some of that tension of like, you stopped me from doing that.
Or you like roll for that or something like that.
Exactly.
It's like, well, I try to do this. Okay, like an opposed roll or something where you're like,
this is that slippery slope of like, when people start, you know, I cast this at another player, and then it's like, this is turning weird.
I find myself in a tough spot. I'm currently playing a game where I'm a lawful evil character in a party full of heroes. And what my character would do is often at a steep risk to the other members of the party. I'm currently duck stepping around a detective, an inspector, to not get caught leading a cult in this city.
Very fun.
So there's a lot of things like my character, because my character would kill people who are criminals, which does cause, you know, he's also part of a bar, so the other players have like
it takes a lot, bringing a lot of heat.
I'm bringing a lot of heat to the other players. Like, you got like, am I going against the party? Not technically, but it's very close.
It causes problems, right? So it's like,
I also want to bring something up that I think is, I don't know, tangentially related, but the idea that like something is something my character would do is also kind of a weird fallacy, kind of, because think about like what you would define as your own character, like as a person, and then think about every out of character decision you've ever made. Like people do not act like acting within character is like something that fictional characters do, which like, sure, you're playing fictional characters, but like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of times Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games they very much play into like verisimilitude. And it's like, oh, this is a real world. And it's like, yeah, in the real world, sometimes you do random ass shit.
Yeah, and also like a great example of that is I, as a person, do not give a shit about cars. I just don't care about them. I would never spend a lot of money on them. I don't care about sports either. But I'm also sort of an awkward social person who wants to make people happy. So when people are like, so did you catch the big game? Especially if you're like in like a haircut or something, you're trapped. I will talk like for a half hour, 45 minutes about sports and a car that this guy likes, because I'm like, this is just, you know, I'm just trying to get through this moment. That is going against my character in that I don't care about either of those things and I don't want to be talking about them. But at the same time, another aspect of my character, which is people pleasing, wants to sort of like help. So like, if you're saying that's not in my character, it's like, well, it's not in part of your character, but maybe it's in a different part.
Yeah, because that example that you gave of like stealthing around the sewers or whatever, and then you see the guy and you want to break this stealth moment, like part of your character is also wanting to keep your party happy.
Yeah,
and, like, keeping
and safe, right?
Yeah, keeping your party safe and So like it could still like think about other things that are within your character that maybe aren't going against the party.
It's like in Point Break where he has the gun locked on his friend who's the robber and then fires the gun into the air. That's a great moment.
And screams.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing.
So, you know, the character conflicts, I think, can be interesting and they can lead to player conflicts. But we talked a little bit about what player conflicts we've seen. Have any of you actually seen it get into a really messy,
like a fist fight?
Well, not maybe that, but like something that's like, okay, nope, this is way too heated. Have you ever actually seen that? I don't think in our groups we really have.
Dude, I've stormed out of a game before.
Well, okay.
I'm sure you did do that.
You did do that once, yeah.
Wait, when was that? Was I part of that?
It was early in the pandemic.
Angrily logged off.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, it was early in the pandemic, and we were all a little stressed.
I don't know why.
I remember.
Yeah,
I'm sure Daniel does too.
It was also a rules thing where
There's a rules lawyer thing.
it was unfun for
We don't have to dig it back up.
things. Yeah, it was an unfun moment, and I'm very sorry about it. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, actually,
I was right, but I'm very sorry about it.
You have to get that one in there. I mean, you were right, but yeah.
yeah.
It's true.
The thing about like I've also been in a moment where I felt the heat of rage start seeping into my chest.
Ezekiel rage.
Yeah, exactly. And like I know most of us are pretty aware of ourselves to be like, okay, we just need to be quiet for a little bit. I'll throw that mute button on and I'll just simmer for a second.
Scream.
Yeah, I've never.
If it's muted, you can scream.
I've never gotten into like a fight where I was like, you and me are like angry now. Like we're not talking anymore as
You're
friends.
dead to me.
Yeah, exactly. But I've had moments where I was like, I'm pissed at this person and I just need to take a moment.
So I asked that because I've not really seen anything actual like, okay, this is a real problem. But we're all on various social media things, and you hear about conflicts that are so clearly like a toxic environment. So, I think we can't really speak from experience in that, but we've certainly had heated moments in our own lives elsewhere. So what do we do to de-escalate those?
This is a really great question because I was recently talking to Bridget Winter, who made Psychic Trash Detectives. Very cool person. You should pre-order it if you're listening to this. But the one thing that she was saying was that if there are safety tools built into that game to be like, if people are starting to get angry at each other, that you can essentially have a moment where it's like there's a pause and a stop where you can be like, pause, like, this isn't for me. Let's like go back 5 minutes and like redo the intro in this so it doesn't end in this place.
the rewind, pause, fast forward things.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are cool tools.
It is a pretty cool tool. And then a pause of like, so that's a pause, and then a stop is like, let's stop. We need to just talk about what just happened because that didn't feel good, and we need to like fix it before we like get back into this game. And then I'm actually not familiar with the fast forward, but maybe it's like there's a scene that you don't hear about.
Like you don't. Yeah, you're not trying to see this romantic moment between two characters or something.
Yeah.
Like when Baltaros and Abraham finally hook up and was like, let's fast forward.
That was all like the little doo-doo-doots, fade to black.
Yeah, fade to
because
black.
no one wanted to do that at the table.
No.
I've definitely paused a game. Yeah, just for a minute. It was. Man, I don't want to get into too many details in case anyone ever hears anything. But a player wanted to do something that I think everyone would have found very morally questionable and like red light territory, bordering on it. And so I just paused it. Yeah, I've told you externally about this. And I paused it and I went, hey, no, because this is another sentient creature. And
Franco's eyes are huge now.
And we don't need to be doing this. What matters now is the situation you're in, not this weird little moment here.
Yeah.
And pause the game. And I will talk about this offline. But
we're gonna talk about this immediately.
absolutely are.
Sorry,
but
everyone.
it's just one of those moments where it is a very useful tool because hey, that really kind of refocused that moment, and you know, it's you want your players to have the freedom as a GM to do things that are interesting to them as well as character defining to them. But at the same time, you also don't want them to, one, do things that are reinforcing of a very bad character trait in general.
I want to hear it again.
And two, you don't want them to do something that is straying from an immediate threat, because and that was you know, that was the way I kind of walked him.
It's always a him.
Yeah, it's honestly, yeah, it's always a him. If you got problems, it's probably a him. So, you know, it's the way I walked him through this was, hey, that's not what, you know, it's your character, but you've got a really big concern. So you shouldn't be worried about this other thing that you're starting to do real quick. This is a seriously big problem you're in, and you need to focus on that. Additionally, side note, that's not a cool thing.
That's gross. And stop it.
Stop it. I'm going to morally judge you. No, you know, I mean, I was very gentle about it, and it refocused. And then, you know, I did see this character begin to kind of grow a little bit into other paths that were similar, but better.
The thing that in that I'm really
because
I'm so sorry. It's too
juicy.
It's too big.
Too big. This is like my least favorite thing on podcasts. They're just like, I'm going to tell you about this thing, but I'm not going to tell you.
That was a full stick of juicy fruit.
I'm so sorry. But I mean, hey, it's general things that you can now use in your general problem.
That's true.
Yeah, another way you can start doing is by interrupting the action as a GM, I think. Like if two people are starting to like get very angry, you can be like, because of the noise here, like guards start coming down the alleyway and they see you like you two funny. Arguing, and you know both of them point at you and say it's the criminal or whatever, and then both of you have to refocus on this other thing, and you can just give them a little time in combat, because combat takes a while in D&D or whatever.
Sure does.
To chill out a bit.
I would say another good way to de-escalate a situation sometimes is to ignore rules that are causing the problem.
Yeah.
Because I remember one time, Frank, I'm going to drag you into
What the fuck?
my story.
Don't ever speak to me.
Not allowed to look across the table at me. No, we were doing a Strahd game, and we had a prisoner. I was like, we're going to execute this prisoner. And we got into a discussion about the alignments in the D&D game.
Oh, I did get mad about that.
And it was, it got real, like,
spicy.
This and that on it. And the, like, general discussion after that was like, okay, you know what? It's not good. The alignment chart.
Yeah.
So sometimes if there's a certain thing in your games that's causing the friction, dump it.
Trash it.
Like, move on past it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You don't need everything in a game that you're playing with.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And, you know, I will just say talk after the session, just actually talk to the people. That's talking it out is, I see so often things about like, oh, this other player did this thing. What do I do on like a D&D subreddit or something, or my GM's doing this. What do I do? And, you know, sometimes you're only seeing one side of the story, so you do probably tend to side with the person who's posting because it's like, yeah, that's not great, but just talk about it is the answer. Yeah. Have a conversation. It's another human across the table from you. I mean, maybe it's an elf, I don't know, but you know, have a conversation.
Kobold. One thing that I'm actually very much an advocate for, though, because I've seen a couple of those sort of one-off posts.
Yeah.
If you're in a situation where it is consistent that this is happening,
yes,
then you just need to stop playing with those people, because that is actually not a normal thing to get into, like a fight with people at the table.
Yeah.
It's a pretty
we were
rare
all racking our brains for actual incidents.
Yeah.
Like
99% of the time, communication will solve the problem. That last 1%. Finding new friends.
Exactly, because like what Daniel was saying is that if your player's having a in-character conflict, then at any time you can pop out and be like, okay, this is like where I'm going and why, and the other person can be like, yeah, that sounds great, like I'm super into this, like don't stop, this is cool, and like usually in-player conflict can be really rewarding and interesting. It's very rare that it gets to the point where someone's like, fuck you, dude, this sucks.
Yeah, I feel like I've had players before that have a sort of confrontational way of speaking that I'm kind of, sometimes it's like, I can't tell if
What's
they're
happening?
actually mad. And then it's like, no, I think this is fine. I don't know. It's fine. And it never breaks out into a fight or anything. It's just like, I like the idea of like, this is like, if you're fighting this often, it's not normal. It just makes me think of like how people are like, well, if you don't fight, you're not really in love or whatever. Like relationships. It's like, if you never fight, then you're not really. It's like, well, if you never fight, you're not a real D&D party or something.
Jesus.
Boy.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about this subject, but from the perspective of being a player and how you can kind of affect this stuff right after the break.
All right, guys, what do we want to talk about for the commercial?
Maybe the hot dog is a sandwich kind of a thing?
No, that's stupid, man. Everyone knows a hot dog is not a sandwich.
All right. What do you want to do then?
Let's talk about what everybody wants to talk about. UFOs.
So my toilet Mike Tyson was telling me the other day that you can survive a zombie apocalypse in a PetSmart.
Dude, are you okay?
Yeah, what was that?
I'm sorry. I don't even know what's happening right now. I've been listening to our podcast a lot recently, and it's a ton. What's going on?
All right, I'm just going to make this easy. Hey, y'all, we are the hosts of Master and Debaters, the podcast that debates all of life's silly questions. Join us every week as we present our hardest opinions on the softest topics. I'm Puck, and football is the worst sport.
I'm Alex, and a hot dog is absolutely a sandwich.
I'm Spencer, and the Beatles suck.
This is Master and Debaters. Find us wherever you get podcasts, and as always, stay mad.
Welcome back, everyone. We are talking about conflicts at the table. Before the break, we talked about as a GM or, running a game, how you can start trying to, solve some of the problems that lead to inter-party conflict or intra-party conflict. But now we're going to talk as players what to do if conflict starts a brewing. What are your go-tos to try to tone that down, bring it back, or how you can sort of either insert yourself in a way that will help or remove yourself in a way that will help? What do you guys think as players?
I don't think I've played in forever.
I mean, it's been a few weeks, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, the forever DMs around the table.
I guess if you're, Nick, you've done this several times in the Argot campaign, twice. But the idea of having a character that has an opposing goal to the party can be really tricky. And it can be fun to navigate and not something I recommend for people who don't play a lot or people that would you want to do this with people you already know.
To be clear, it's a very different experience. And the first time I did it with Mallory, who is a insane gnome, kind of Lovecraftian hero where he wasn't a hero at all. And
He had an
a
obsession.
Yeah, he had an obsession and was willing to do anything for it. That just turned the party to be I don't like this guy. And that can be very isolating as a player as well. And eventually when Mallory got sent to hell by a slot, everyone was like, that's okay, we can just leave him there.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have an easy way to hell either.
No, totally. No, but I thought and as a player, I kind of knew what I was doing. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then the second time I was like, that was actually really interesting to have that in the game. And I came to you and I said, do you have any sort of story stuff that you haven't been able to bring out in the campaign yet? And you said, well, the nature spirits that you guys are working for are a little bit more complex than everyone sort of thinks. And I was like, great. Why don't I make a character to help you bring that part of the story out? And it led to player upon player killings.
Yeah. And then my character was corrupted by your character's choices, and I got pulled into your nonsense.
You're both robots.
I mean, you did
sort of.
It was up to you. I gave you the choice. You could have sided with one side or the other.
But it was really but I also was making choices throughout my time as that character, knowing that this character was going to either die by my party's hand or going to change the party's mind into doing it the way that this person thought. There really wasn't a middle ground. And so in that way I was I am playing with an end goal in mind, which was a story moment, and we got there, and it was an interesting, cool story moment.
Yeah, and it's a very difficult thing to do, and I don't recommend everyone do that.
Yeah, I
But
like
it's-
literally
yeah.
only did that because I was like not sure if I was going to play Mallory or someone completely different once we got out of the demi-plane. And so I was sort of like, I will play another character until the end of this arc, which is when
Intermezzo.
Exactly, yeah. And so I was able to just kind of, be a little bit of pepper in the meal that was this campaign, which was really fun.
I think you kind of stumbled into a good answer for if you're as a conflict, you're as a player getting like in too deep. Switch your characters. You don't have to stay committed to that
Yeah.
that one character for an entire because campaigns can last for like 2 or 3 years. You won't be stuck with going into a game going, everyone hates me. I don't want to do this. Have you leave
Yeah.
as a in-game character.
as a
Don't just leave your table if you're
Yeah,
still-
like Franco and Daniel, you've both said this on past episodes, but if everyone is doing one thing and you're like, I get on a horse and ride south, then it's like, okay, well, that's not this campaign, so I guess roll another character.
I'm not going to run a separate story for you.
Yeah, and you can always, again,
unless you're Shade, who currently is right now running a separate story.
I mean,
I guess so.
I'll do anything for you.
Hey, as
sweet
long as
babies.
you're still in town, I think it's fine.
yeah. The game is called Waterdeep, not, specific portion of Waterdeep.
Yeah, you're not like on the other side of the world. You're just like down the street doing crime.
yeah.
But what if I made him suddenly teleport to another part of the world?
Then I would request that you guys run
kidding,
the
I'm
session
kidding.
separately.
Kidding.
Yeah, because I was like, okay, so this is actually like a bit of a conflict for me as a player that I've gotten myself into as I'm playing this. Like, I'm playing a plot line that's important to Valen, my character, which means that he is by himself in a group of seven
Total, yeah.
total player characters, which means to run a session, I'm getting maybe like 20 minutes
Yeah, I'm trying.
out of like it's fine.
Yeah.
And you're working. We're doing what we can.
Yep.
But this is like sometimes if you're going out on your own, that means your playing time is going to be cut.
Yeah.
And, I like to look, I will say, I know we're talking about players, but you need to understand that as a player.
Yeah.
From a GM perspective, if that is a thing where if you look at every fantasy media around, right down to Lord of the Rings, the party's never together. I mean, like, they're just always fucking split up. So I'm not adverse to that as a GM or as a player, as long as there is a through line and or they will come together again. And I certainly I know ways that you will be led back to the party or the party will
Well, I feel like
be
we've
led
kind of done
back to you.
a figure eight.
Yeah.
Where my solo story looped back into the party's theater night story arc that we had, and then I faded back out.
Yep.
So those little cross points are always important. But again, me and the player, myself and Shade, the GM, talked about what we were doing before we got into this whole big, long,
Right, just like
complicated single player story.
And that's, I think, a big way for if you are a player trying to do something kind of specific and maybe antithetical to what the rest of the party is doing in a moment, that you have to be in constant communication with your GM to say like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Or like going back to like, you can always leave as a character. It's totally okay to go to your GM and say like, hey, this character's arc is done, or like, it doesn't feel like this is a good fit anymore. Like, can we work on a really cool death or like a reason how this character gets put away and I can make a new one kind of thing?
I mean, same campaign, because you all, before you started really splitting off into your own little worlds in Waterdeep, you all were, we were doing the Dragon Heist campaign.
Yep.
And you all just caused a lot of chaos on a day that was already supposed to be chaotic in the narrative, according to the book, because there's like a bombing that happens essentially. And Jackie's character went, the moment that the guards showed up at your door, she went, nope. Flew away and came in with a brand new character the next session. That is a valid thing to do. And you should be, again, don't be precious with your stories. Don't be precious with your characters. Things can change, and be precious with the time you're spending with these people and the fun you're having. That's what you should be precious about.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So we're kind of coming to the end here. So let's assume that everything has failed. Conflict is rife. Things are bad.
Somehow your dice have caught on fire.
Yeah, it's the worst timeline. What do you do when people are starting to get into they're trying to wield game mechanics against each other, either as a player or as a GM? Like as a GM, I have always been like, you just can't do that.
Yep.
But I know that there's other moments that we were talking about, like in game, like as player or as characters, that like being restrained by someone could be a cool like character moment or a story moment. So like, how do you do this?
Well, one of the things I've always like disallowed is you can't roll a persuasion on a party member.
Yeah,
Right.
no,
You
it's
can't
just
use
not-
the mechanic to force a player to be convinced to do something that you want to do.
Yeah.
So step one, don't allow persuasion checks. Deception checks are tricky because sometimes your character is going to do something that you want to hide.
Yeah, there's that running joke, which is, I mean, like this is like a running joke, so it's not really like that crucial, but like my character in Waterdeep is a doppelganger and Nick's character is an investigator who still hasn't figured out that my character is a doppelganger and just thinks that the party has like several more members than it actually does.
This is a 20-person crew.
Yeah, and it's amazing because whenever you change into a different person, like within a dungeon, and like come back around a corner, Marks is always like, "Bourbon, why are you down here?"
Yeah, and I think that can be like a fun playful moment to introduce like perception or like, you know,
It's
stuff
that
like that.
fine line everyone at the table has to walk. Are you doing this for fun and story?
Right. Yeah.
Or are you doing this to try to control what another player does?
Right.
Yeah.
And
Or can or
having-
can't do.
having that conversation, because we have straight up said, Nick, do you want to have figured this out yet, or do you enjoy this goof? Yeah, we've just had we'll take a pause. We'll have that conversation because the narrative doesn't have to. It can't be in a TTRPG. It's not a seamless, like you have to take pauses to interact with game mechanics at some point.
Yeah.
So it's not a seamless storytelling experience. So interact with each other on an emotional level as well.
Yeah, I think that if things start getting spicy and people are starting to try to cast spells at each other, then that is when you just say like, we're pausing. We're pausing right now. This has gotten way out of hand. Let's like rewind if we have to. We can do all these different like safety tools to try to figure this out. And as a player, you can totally call for this as well.
Absolutely.
There are some systems that build this in. Like I know that there are some Powered by the Apocalypse, and the one that I'm most knowledgeable about is Monster of the Week. But there's like a couple of archetypes within that say, if you like your player gives advice going to your control thing, like trying to control another player, there's some mechanics that I think Powered by the Apocalypse does cool, like very well, where you say, okay, you give somebody an order or a bit of advice. If they follow it, then they get a +1 on whatever they're like ongoing to whatever rolls they make while they're trying to do that, because you are knowledgeable about this subject. There's also mechanics where it's like someone gives you advice, you ignore all of it, take a +1. So there are different things you can do in there as well.
And I think experience points can play into those as well. Like it's like if you ignore all threats or whatever and just rush in, you know, you take experience or whatever, that type of thing.
And also the Thirsty Sword Lesbians had a lot of mechanics where it's like,
You're interacting
if you
with each
do
other.
this or you do that, you take strings on other players, which like affect the rolls, or you can like detract from theirs. But it sort of balances out that you can try to make another player do something. But you can't outrightly control their outcomes.
It's like Urban Shadows did that a little bit with the bonds and like the debts that you owed each other, that you could essentially like impose penalties on people rolling, and if they didn't do what they promised you they would do, kind of thing. And that's interesting to me as well. But I think that all the difference between that and something like people starting to roll on each other is that those are all mechanics baked into the game. And so all the players are aware of them when they make the debts. Like they say, I promise I'll do this. Okay, take a debt. Everyone knows what that means and what that can be used for in the future. Whereas, you know, I'm rolling a persuasion roll on you in this moment doesn't feel like that to me. It feels more like I don't like the choice you're making and I'm trying to stop it.
Because a lot of the PBTA games, like they're about narrative control, whereas like D&D is a skirmish game that turned into a role playing game or something.
Totally, totally.
It's like we're all just like kind of playing pretend and not like there's no like mechanics in D&D that let you control or not control the narrative. Like and switch back between control.
Does anyone have sort of final thoughts as we close in on the end of our conflict themed episode?
Leave rage to the barbarians.
Leave rage to the barbarians. Don't turn on your party.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a really good thing to remember is like, even if your character is not close to your party, usually they're partying up because they find safety in numbers. And you can just say like keeping the integrity of the party, like keeping everyone together is probably somewhat important to your character, even if they don't like the rest of the party, because that is where safety is. You know?
That was the big lesson of Stranger Things season 1. Where if you are in a party with these people, both in game and out, like just don't be a dick.
Yeah. All right. And on that note of don't be a dick, we are going to close out. But before we do, I would love to remind everyone that Tabletop is a proud member of the Helios Network, a podcast network by normal people for normal people. There's a bunch of cool shows on the network like I'll Be Careful, You'll Be Dead, which is a Star Wars fan podcast. They're starting to get into sort of like new season Mandalorian stuff, and it's been a really cool few episodes lately. So go give them a listen. And I just want to tell everyone, thank you so much for listening. If you have questions, you can go to our website, tabletopod.com, and you can send us a contact form. We read all of the emails we get. The form is just on that first landing page if you scroll down a little bit, and we do mailbag episodes. So if you have questions for the crew, send them on in. I hate both of you.
Hey, I didn't say it.
Thank you, Franco.
Yeah,
we're not in a fight, but I'm in a fight with both of you.
Oh, no. Start fighting. I think we could take him.
Yeah.
That was the lesson
I'm just going to roll
episode,
persuasion and make him
There
not
we
be
go.
mad.
Yeah, that'll be
you
it.
All right, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Don't be a dick.